welcome to today's deep dive.
Yeah, we're gonna be focusing on just one source today,
Okay.
but I think you'll agree it's a really powerful one. We're taking a look at Carter G. Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro. This book was published way back in 1933,
Wow.
and it's almost a century later, and it still has the power to really make you think.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You know, the core argument of the book is pretty unsettling.
Well,
Woodson basically says that the education system that was set up for Black Americans, it wasn't actually designed to help them thrive.
oh, wow.
Instead, he argues that it was, more about making them feel inferior
Okay.
and keeping them from reaching their full potential, which is a pretty heavy accusation to make.
Yeah.
So we're gonna unpack it together and see, how it holds up.
Hmm.
Nearly a century later. That's a great point. Yeah, and it's not even just about overt racism, which is shocking enough on its own, but Woodson is really dissecting something way more insidious. It's the way that education can be used to almost control how people think.
Right.
Not just what they know, but how they see themselves and the world around them.
That's really interesting. Okay, well, let's jump right in. With this idea of internalized inferiority,
Okay.
it's not just a theory.
Mm.
Woodson lays out some really, specific and disturbing examples
Yeah.
of how this played out in the early 20th century.
Right. So, for example, he talks about a white instructor
Yeah.
at a Black summer school. And this instructor was using a textbook that straight up taught Black inferiority.
Wow.
You can imagine going to school, a place where you're supposed to be learning and growing
Yeah.
and being taught that you are inherently less than because of your race.
Oh, that's awful. And it wasn't just isolated incidents either. Like he describes this, this barrage of negative messages.
Yeah.
They were just constantly being hammered into Black students. Textbooks across different subjects that portrayed Black people negatively. Law and medical schools
Yeah.
that were reinforcing these, dangerous stereotypes about Black people and criminality or Black
Yeah.
people and disease.
Oh, wow.
It's almost like, a deliberate effort to chip away at their self-worth.
Right. And he even makes this incredibly powerful statement where he compares this kind of education to the worst sort of lynching.
Wow.
Just think about the weight of that comparison for a second.
Yeah.
It might not be physical violence, but the psychological damage is just as real
Right.
and maybe even more insidious because it's harder to see and fight against. You're not just harming a person, you're crushing their spirit, their belief in themselves and their future.
And it's so hard to undo that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this can lead to, some really deep-seated psychological effects like internalized racism, where individuals actually start to believe the negative stereotypes about their own racial group. And this obviously impacts their self-esteem and their opportunities. And then there's, stereotype threat, where studies have shown that just knowing about a negative stereotype related to your group can actually make you perform worse on tasks.
Oh, wow.
Confirming the stereotype in this cruel, self-fulfilling prophecy. And what's really amazing is that Woodson was highlighting these dynamics decades before modern psychology really began to study them in earnest.
That's incredible. It makes you wonder, how much of this is still happening today, consciously or unconsciously.
It's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And now, here's where I think things get even more interesting.
Okay.
Woodson also criticizes how this education system was purposely disconnecting Black people from the practical realities of life, the things that they needed to thrive in the real world.
So like practical skills and things like that.
Yep.
It makes you wonder, who benefits from a system like that?
Right.
That keeps a certain group of people from developing those practical skills
Mm.
and becoming economically self-sufficient. It's almost like, by pushing this classical education, one that focused on abstract ideas and theories, the system was subtly controlling their access to economic power.
Wow. And Woodson brings this to life with a great personal anecdote.
Okay.
He compares his own classical education, which he clearly valued, to that of one of his schoolmates who chose a more practical path, studying wool, and ended up, quite wealthy.
Yeah.
So he's not saying that a classical education is bad.
Right.
But he is highlighting how an education that's disconnected from practical application can actually limit your options in life.
Precisely, yeah. It raises the question, what good is an education if it doesn't give you the tools to actually navigate the real world, to build a stable life for yourself, and to contribute to your community? Education should be about empowering people, not keeping them dependent on systems that may not have their best interests at heart.
Okay, so we've got this idea of internalized inferiority and this disconnect between education and practical life. And now Woodson goes on to take aim at the role of white educators in black institutions. And he does not hold back. He's very critical of their presence and their often patronizing attitudes.
Well, this is about power dynamics, right? Even with the best intentions. There's this fundamental imbalance when the people in charge of educating a historically oppressed group come from the group that's been doing the oppressing. So you have to think about the messages, both subtle and overt, that get sent in that kind of environment.
He shares these really, pointed anecdotes, like white female teachers who would bow to him on campus, but then completely ignore him off campus.
Wow.
Or white presidents of black colleges who created this culture of exclusion, even within institutions. They were meant to serve black students.
It's almost like these anecdotes highlight how insidious bias can really be. It's not always about outright discrimination. Sometimes it's about these microaggressions, these seemingly small slights and dismissals that build up over time and send this clear message about who really belongs and who's just,
tolerated.
It makes you think about the long-term psychological toll of those kinds of experiences.
Especially on young people who are already grappling with issues of identity and belonging.
Something we need to be more aware of, especially in educational settings where those power dynamics are often at play.
Absolutely.
Okay, now Woodson doesn't stop there. He turns his attention to the black church.
Oh, interesting. An institution that's been so, so central to black life and culture. And he acknowledges its importance, but he's also critical of some of its shortcomings.
Okay.
He points out that while it's a significant asset to the community, it's often susceptible to outside influence and internal divisions that prevent it from reaching its full potential.
The church has always played this really complex and multifaceted role in black communities. It's been a source of spiritual grounding, a place for social support and community building, and a powerful force for political activism and social change. But it's also been vulnerable to manipulation, sometimes reinforcing the very power structures that Woodson is critiquing.
And he illustrates this with a powerful example. He describes attending a popular black church with thousands of members, but realizing that he only recognized 2 other college graduates in the entire congregation.
That's really striking.
Yeah, and it really highlights the disconnect between the, the educated elite and the masses, even within a shared space of faith.
This disconnect speaks to a larger issue that Woodson tackles, which is the overemphasis on leadership within the black community.
Oh, interesting.
He argued that this focus on, titles and positions often led to unproductive competition and these ego-driven pursuits rather than, genuine collective progress.
So it's about more than just, talking the talk.
Yeah, exactly.
Not about walking the walk.
Walking the walk, yeah. There's a danger in performative leadership. Real progress comes from the grassroots, from individuals taking initiative and working together to actually solve problems.
And this ties directly into his emphasis on economic empowerment. He's adamant that black people need to achieve true self-sufficiency by building their own businesses, controlling their own resources, and becoming active participants in the economy instead of relying on handouts or waiting for, others to create opportunities for them.
He's talking about breaking free from this system of dependency that was intentionally designed to keep black people subordinate. Economic power is about controlling your own destiny, building wealth within your community, and using that power to achieve real, lasting change.
And he uses, it's a really striking example to bring this point home. There's this story of the young woman who couldn't live on $15 a week.
Wow.
because she'd been taught to,
To prioritize.
appearances and social status over, financial prudence.
It's a stark reminder of how
Yeah.
those insidious messages of inferiority can really seep into everyday life,
Yeah.
influencing everything from spending habits to career choices, keeping
Mhm.
people trapped in these cycles of debt and economic instability.
It's a sad reality. And then there's the anecdote about
Uh-huh.
the black businessman who shows up in a $10,000 car, but is representing a firm with very little capital.
Oh, wow.
Like this, you know, outward display of success
Mhm.
is masking this deeper economic vulnerability.
It points to this culture
Yeah.
that often values appearance over substance. And while that's not, unique to any one group, it can be especially detrimental in a community that's struggling to build economic power
Yeah.
and to break free from systemic disadvantage.
So we've got this idea of,
Yeah.
internalized inferiority, the disconnect between education and practical life, the role of white educators, the complexities of the black church, the critique of leadership, and the call for economic empowerment. That's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
And we're just getting started. But before we move on, there's one more idea that I found particularly fascinating
Okay.
and a bit paradoxical. Woodson actually suggests that segregation, well, obviously, a terrible and unjust system, could actually be strategically used by black communities
Okay.
to build their own power base
Yeah.
before fully integrating into
Yeah.
a society that was often hostile.
It's a controversial idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it speaks to this this tension between fighting for integration while recognizing the need to build self-sufficiency within a system that's actively working against you.
And he uses this really powerful analogy, comparing it to the idea of
Yeah.
the wrath of man praising God.
Yeah.
Even something negative like segregation can be harnessed and transformed into something positive.
It's about it's about agency. It's about taking control of your own narrative and using the very tools of oppression to dismantle the system.
It's a daring idea, but I guess that's what Woodson was all about, challenging conventional thinking and pushing people to think differently about the paths to
liberation.
absolutely. He was a
Yeah.
real pioneer in that way.
It's amazing how much this book still resonates today.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Almost like it was written for our times.
It really does.
Woodson's ideas have had this incredible ripple effect, influencing generations of scholars and activists and educators who are trying to, really change the system.
As I was reading this, I kept thinking, this could have been written yesterday.
I know, right?
So many of the issues he raises are still front and center. In our current debates about education,
Absolutely.
things like representation in textbooks,
Yeah.
making sure that teaching methods are relevant to different cultures, and, what's behind this persistent achievement gap between students of different backgrounds.
It's so true. And his critique of how the education system prioritizes rote memorization and standardized testing over actually teaching kids to think critically and solve problems.
Yeah.
This is something that so many educators are wrestling with right now.
Absolutely. And his call for economic empowerment feels incredibly urgent, given this huge wealth gap that still exists between black and white Americans. It's like we're still dealing with the consequences of the very systems he was criticizing almost a century ago.
What's striking is how Woodson anticipated so many of the arguments that we're having now about things like reparations and economic justice. He understood that true equality goes way beyond just changing laws, right?
Yeah.
You have to address the fundamental imbalances in economic power that have been baked into the system for centuries.
It's not just about leveling the playing field.
Right.
It's about giving everyone the tools and resources they need to build a future for themselves.
Absolutely.
And, on that note, let's circle back to that fascinating and somewhat controversial idea we touched on earlier.
Right.
Woodson's suggestion that segregation could actually be used as a tool for liberation.
It's a tough one.
He argued that, counterintuitively, separation could allow black communities to build up their economic and social power before having to fully integrate into a society that wasn't always welcoming.
It's a really complex idea that challenges a lot of assumptions.
It does.
In a way, it kind of foreshadowed the Black Power movement
Yeah.
of the 1960s and 70s, which also placed a huge emphasis on self-reliance and Black control of institutions.
It is hard to wrap your head around, especially given, you know, the horrors of segregation.
Right.
But I can see how, in a twisted way, it might have made sense as a strategy for survival and empowerment, a very hostile environment.
It raises so many questions about how to navigate a system that's designed to keep you marginalized.
Right.
Do you fight for integration at all costs? Or do you focus on building strength within your own community first? It's not an easy answer.
And this ties into something else that really stood out to me in the book, Woodson's focus on the psychological impact of miseducation.
Right.
It's not just about what you're taught, but about how those teachings affect your sense of self, your belief in your own abilities, and your dreams for the future.
It's so true.
He argues that constantly being told you're inferior can actually make you believe it, which then limits your aspirations and potential.
This is an area where Woodson was way ahead of his time. You know, we're only now really beginning to understand the damaging effects of things like stereotype threat, where people from marginalized groups perform worse on tasks when they're aware of negative stereotypes about their group.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
If everyone keeps telling you you're not good at math, you might start to believe it.
Right.
And then you're less likely to put in the effort needed to succeed.
Yeah.
And that's not because you're not capable. It's because the constant negativity has eroded your confidence and belief in yourself.
Precisely. And that's why it's so crucial to create learning environments that are truly affirming, that celebrate diversity, and that actively challenge those harmful stereotypes.
It's not just about teaching the content. It's about creating a space where students feel safe to learn and grow, where they can see themselves represented in positive ways, and where their potential is nurtured, not limited.
I think that's a key takeaway. From Woodson's work, he was really pushing for this complete shift in mindset, not just tweaks to the existing system.
Right. It's a whole new way of thinking.
Exactly.
Speaking of challenging the status quo, let's talk about his critique of the Black church.
Okay.
Oh.
He clearly saw it as both an asset and a potential obstacle to progress. He recognized its importance as a community institution, a place of faith and support, but also criticized its susceptibility to outside influence and internal divisions.
The church has always held this complicated position within Black communities. You know, it's been a source of hope and resilience and spiritual guidance, but also at times a site of
social control
and the reinforcement of conservative values. And those divisions can be really damaging, especially when they prevent people from working together towards shared goals.
It's almost like this internal struggle between embracing progress and clinging to tradition. You know, Woodson was calling for critical engagement with those traditions, recognizing both the strengths and the limitations of the church as a vehicle for social change.
Okay, and then there's that fascinating critique he offers of the overemphasis on leadership within the Black community.
Right.
An idea that feels incredibly relevant even today.
Absolutely.
He argued that too much focus on leadership often led to competition and ego trips rather than, real meaningful progress for the community as a whole.
He was really advocating for this more humble, service-oriented approach to leadership, one that prioritizes collective uplift over individual ambition. He believed that true progress would come from the ground up, from everyday people rolling up their sleeves and working together to solve problems, not from those seeking positions or title.
It's a powerful message.
It is.
And one that, we could all use a reminder of. Regardless of our background,
absolutely,
we need more doers. Not just talkers.
Exactly. It's about valuing the work itself, not just the recognition that comes with.
And this ties directly into Woodson's call for skilled workers, individuals who are equipped to tackle the practical challenges facing their communities.
Right.
It's about recognizing the dignity and importance of all types of labor, not just those that are traditionally seen as prestigious or intellectual.
Right. About valuing the contributions of everyone, regardless of their educational background or job title. It's about recognizing that everyone has a role to play in building a better future.
That's a vision of community that I think we can all get behind.
I agree.
And it brings us back to Woodson's emphasis on Economic empowerment, which feels even more urgent given the persistent wealth gap we see today.
He was adamant that Black people needed to pool their resources, develop their own businesses, and become active players in the economy rather than being relegated to the margins.
His critique of relying on white patronage is also really insightful.
Absolutely.
He understood that. True empowerment wouldn't come from handouts or charity, but from building self-sufficiency and controlling your own destiny.
It's about owning your labor, your resources, and your future. It's about breaking free from systems of dependency that were designed to keep people powerless.
It's a message that resonates so strongly today.
It does.
Especially as we see the rise of entrepreneurship and calls for economic justice across different communities.
And this is where things get really interesting because Woodson wasn't afraid to challenge conventional thinking, even within his own community.
Yes.
You know, his ideas have been both embraced and debated over the years. Some critics argue that. His emphasis on Black self-reliance can lead to separatism and isolation, potentially hindering progress towards integration.
That's a fair point. It's like walking a tightrope.
It is.
You're trying to build strength and independence, but you also don't want to reinforce divisions. That can be harmful.
And there are also those who question some of his views on gender roles, which were very much rooted in the social norms of his time.
Right.
So we have to acknowledge that historical context and recognize that even the most brilliant minds are shaped by the world they live in.
It's a reminder that we always have to be critically engaging with these texts, not just taking them at face value, but also recognizing their limitations.
Absolutely. It's about having those nuanced conversations and recognizing that progress is often messy and complicated. You know, there's rarely a simple solution, and different perspectives are essential for moving forward.
And that's what makes Woodson's work so enduring.
It is.
He wasn't afraid to ask difficult questions, to challenge assumptions, and to push people to think in new ways.
He was a visionary who understood that true liberation required this fundamental transformation of thinking, not just superficial changes to the existing system.
And one of the most lasting impacts of this education of the Negro has been in the field of education itself.
Absolutely. Woodson's work was instrumental in laying the groundwork for the entire field of African-American studies, inspiring generations of scholars to challenge those dominant Eurocentric narratives and to shed light on the richness and complexity of Black history and culture.
And his ideas about culturally responsive teaching, making sure the curriculum reflects the experiences and perspectives of diverse students. It becomes so central to so many conversations about educational equity today.
It's about moving away from that old assimilationist model of education. That was all about erasing cultural differences and forcing everyone into this single mold.
It's about recognizing that diversity is a strength, not a weakness. And it's about making sure every student feels seen, heard, and valued for who they are.
Woodson was also a huge inspiration for the movement to create Black-controlled schools and educational institutions. You know, spaces where Black students could learn from teachers who understood their unique needs and aspirations.
It was about taking ownership of education, not just accepting whatever was handed down by those in power.
Precisely. It was about recognizing that that true empowerment also means controlling the narratives that shape how you see yourself and the world around you.
And that's something that's still so relevant today.
It is.
And we're seeing this renewed focus on culturally specific education, not as a way to separate, but as a way to empower and create a more just an equitable system for everyone.
It's about recognizing that that different communities might have different needs and aspirations when it comes to education. And that's okay. It's about creating multiple pathways to success.
You know, it's fascinating how Woodson's critique of the education system goes beyond just racial inequality. He was also challenging the very purpose of education itself.
Oh, wow.
Asking some fundamental questions about what we should be teaching and why.
He was deeply critical of an education system that focused on rote learning and standardized tests. It's the only measures of success, ignoring the importance of critical thinking, problem solving, and the development of the whole person.
He believed that education should be about more than just getting a job or climbing the ladder.
Right.
It should be about cultivating A love of learning, fostering curiosity, and equipping individuals with the tools to live meaningful and fulfilling lives.
His vision of education was deeply humanistic. It was about nurturing the whole person, their intellect, their creativity, their moral compass, and their connection to their community.
It's about more than just filling your head with facts. It's about preparing you to engage with the world in a thoughtful, compassionate, and effective way.
And that's a legacy that continues to inspire educators and activists today.
It's amazing to think that a book written almost a century ago
Oh, no.
can still feel so relevant and urgent.
Woodson's insights into the nature of oppression, the power of education, and the importance of self-determination continue to resonate.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, the struggle for social justice is far from over.
Miseducation of the Negro is a powerful reminder that the fight for quality education isn't just about academic achievement. It's about liberation.
It is.
It's about equipping individuals with the
knowledge, the skills.
and the critical thinking abilities they need to challenge injustice and create a more equitable world.
It's about recognizing that education is never neutral. It's always embedded in this larger social and political context. And it's our responsibility to ensure that it's used as a tool for empowerment, not oppression.
The Miseducation of the Negro is a book that everyone should read, regardless of their race or background.
I agree.
It's a timeless text that pushes us to think critically about the purpose of education, the insidious nature of oppression, and the possibilities for social change.
It has the power to spark those difficult conversations, to inspire action, and to help us build a more just and equitable world for all.
And that brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive into the miseducation of the Negro. Join us in part 3, where we'll delve even deeper into Woodson's vision for a truly liberating education and explore how his ideas can inform our efforts to create a better, fairer education system for all.
Looking forward to it.
So we spent a lot of time, talking about the problems that Woodson laid out in the miseducation of the Negro. But now I'm really curious to dig into the solutions he proposed. Like, what did he actually envision for truly liberating education? One that would empower Black Americans to reach their full potential.
Well, Woodson was very clear that it wasn't going to be like a quick fix or a simple tweak to the existing system.
Yeah.
He was talking about a complete paradigm shift, a fundamental rethinking of what education should be and who it should serve.
So not just adding a few Black history lessons into the curriculum.
No.
Something much deeper and more transformative.
He argued that education should be grounded in the experiences and aspirations of the very people it's meant to serve. So for Black Americans, that meant an education that that instilled pride in their heritage, their culture, and their unique contributions to the world, rather than, shame and this constant feeling of inadequacy.
So instead of trying to force Black students into a mold that wasn't made for them, he was saying, let's recognize and nurture their specific strengths and potential.
Exactly. He wanted to see a curriculum that centered Black perspectives, that highlighted the achievements of Black people throughout history and across, different fields. And he believed that this wouldn't just benefit Black students, it would make education richer and more meaningful for everyone by providing this more complete and accurate understanding of the world.
This idea of making education relevant to different cultures. We're still struggling with that today, aren't we?
Absolutely. There's this growing recognition that this one-size-fits-all approach to education simply doesn't work. We need to create learning environments that are inclusive and that value the diverse backgrounds and experiences of all students, not just those who fit a certain mold.
And Woodson went beyond just saying include more diverse content. He really emphasized the importance of developing critical thinking skills.
Right.
He felt that Black students, especially, needed to be equipped to analyze information, question assumptions, and challenge the status quo.
Remember, he was writing this during a time of intense racial segregation and discrimination.
Right.
So he saw critical thinking as an absolutely essential tool for dismantling the systems of oppression that had been built up over generations.
He wanted Black students to be able to see through, the propaganda, the stereotypes the subtle and not so subtle messages of inferiority that were constantly being thrown at them.
So it wasn't just about learning Black history and culture. It was about learning how to think critically about the world around them, how to ask the tough questions and challenge the narratives that were being used to keep them down.
He was giving them the intellectual tools to become
agents of change.
Exactly.
You know, to fight for their own liberation and the liberation of their...
He was empowering them
take control
of their own destinies.
And this connects so powerfully with his emphasis on
self-reliance.
Right.
He believed that Black people needed to build their own institutions, their own businesses, their own, support systems, rather than relying on white patronage or government handouts.
This idea of self-determination was at the very core of his vision for a truly liberated Black community. It's about taking control of your own destiny, your own resources, and your own future, rather than waiting for someone else to give you permission or to hand you opportunities.
And that idea was pretty radical even back then.
It was.
Some people accused him of
promoting
separatism. But Woodson always maintained that he saw self-reliance as an essential step toward achieving true equality.
He understood that simply integrating into a society that was still deeply unequal and often hostile would magically lead to liberation. He argued that Black people needed to build a solid foundation of economic and social power within their own communities before they could effectively challenge the larger structures of racism and discrimination.
It makes sense. It's about recognizing that integration is only part of the solution.
Right.
That it needs to be coupled with this, parallel effort to create strong and resilient Black institutions and communities.
He wasn't saying reject integration. He was saying be strategic. Build power where you can so you can fight for justice on your own terms.
And this brings us to another crucial part of Woodson's vision.
Okay.
The role of Black educators.
Right.
He was a firm believer in the power of representation, arguing that Black students needed to see themselves reflected in the people who were teaching them, that they needed role models who understood their lived experiences and shared their aspirations.
He was a huge advocate for the training and development of Black teachers and for the creation of schools and educational institutions that were controlled by and accountable to the Black community.
And that's an idea that's still so relevant today, right? We're still talking about the need for more diversity in the teaching profession.
Sure.
For culturally responsive teaching methods, for creating spaces where all students feel seen and supported.
Decades of research have shown that students of color benefit academically and socially from having teachers who look like them, who understand their cultural background, and who can relate to their experiences. It's about building trust, creating a sense of belonging, and showing students that they can achieve anything they set their minds to.
It's about creating a learning environment where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered to succeed.
And that's really what Woodson's vision was all about. He was calling for this complete transformation of the way we think about education, moving away from those old Eurocentric assimilationist models that had dominated for so long, and towards this more inclusive, equitable, and empowering approach to teaching and learning.
So what can we take away from all this? What's the lasting legacy of the miseducation of the Negro?
I think it continues to challenge us to be critical of the systems that we're a part of, to ask tough questions about who benefits and who's left behind. It reminds us that education is never neutral. It's always embedded in this larger social and political context, and that we have a responsibility to ensure that it's used as a tool for liberation, not oppression.
And it's not just a historical document. Woodson's ideas are still relevant today.
They are.
As we continue to grapple with issues of racial inequality, educational disparities, and the fight for social justice.
It's a call to action for all of us, educators, parents, policymakers, community members, to work together to create a better, fairer, and more equitable education system for all students.
Well, on that note, we wrap up our deep dive into the miseducation of the Negro. We hope this conversation has sparked some new ideas, challenged some old assumptions, and maybe even inspired you to pick up the book yourself and engage with Woodson's powerful and enduring message.
It's a book that has the power to change the way you see the world
Yeah.
and your place in it. It's a book that can spark important conversations, challenge the status quo, and ultimately help us build a more just and equitable world for all.
Thanks for joining us.